Our studies in Exodus today are focused upon chapter 16 verse 1 to chapter 17 verse 21. 16 verses 1 to 36 describes a further trial which God placed before the Israelites. Inconvenience at Marah was succeeded by what the people regarded as a serious need in the desert of Sin. Egyptian slaves were generally well looked after. That Israel had known that this as their own experience is implied in chapter 16 verse 3. Doubtless the pleasures of the past were exaggerated, but that is so often the way. What was remarkable was less than 3 months after the people had been delivered from cruel bondage, they were complaining that the menu in the desert was not to their liking. For that was the point. Whatever they might have said about starving, the reality was that they had left Egypt with their flocks and herds. We're no different. Losing sight of the greatness of all that God has and is doing for us, we become discouraged because we think God ought to be doing things better. We short-sightedly focus on a minor setback and lose sight of the vast treasures that are ours in Christ Jesus. In this passage, the folly of the people is forcefully stated. They'd grumbled, and the grumbling had been against the Lord. This is emphasized in verses 7, 8, 9 and 11. The very God who had faithfully provided for Abraham, Isaac, Jacob and, most remarkably, them, was the object of their complaints. What a rebuke to us when we react to inconvenience or lack in the same sort of way. Amazingly, God gave them what they wanted and made arrangements for their long-term need for food. First came the quail and then the provision of manna. Each was given as evidence that the Lord would always provide for his people. In our own faithlessness, God is often far more merciful than we deserve, and yet we so often react exactly as many of the Israelites did. Given detailed instructions by the Lord concerning the collection of the manna, and evidence that they would receive all that they needed, there were still those who persistently disregarded his words. And the only people to lose out as a result of such conduct were those who disobeyed. It's so easy to be deceived, as Adam and Eve were, into thinking that God's commands are for his benefit and not ours. Sadly, the world is full of people whose lives have been scarred or even wrecked because they think in this way. We need to discipline ourselves to recognize that all that the Lord requires of us is for our blessing and our good. The last verses of chapter 16 contain a repeated reference to the pot of manna, which was to be subsequently stored in the Ark of the Testimony. This should have provided the people with a permanent reminder that the Lord gives his people each day their daily bread. The following chapters show, however, how often this was ignored, or perhaps more forcefully forgotten. 2 further trials are described in chapter 17. There is the lack of water in the first 7 verses and the attack of the Amalekites in verses 8 to 16. Sometimes believers find themselves in a situation which is disastrous unless, that is, God intervene. That was true for Israel when they came to Rephidim. Unlike Marah, where the water had been bitter but drinkable, at Rephidim there was no water at all. Immediately the people assumed the worst of the Lord, and their question implies that they doubted his ability to meet this particular need. But despite their doubts, the Lord did provide. Indeed, it's interesting to notice that the name given to the place did not reflect his provision, but the doubts of his people. God's provision was entirely predictable. What was more remarkable was the response of the people, and it was that response that gave the names testing and quarrelling to the place. The Christian very soon learns that the path of true discipleship is beset with warfare. Sin and the devil are not easily conquered, and the battle characterizes even the youngest believer. The Apostle John understood this in his first letter. He told the young men that they had overcome the evil one. Whatever else could be said of them, they had experienced and gained some victories in Christian warfare. But that was not, of course, the whole story. Thus we're not surprised by the attack of the Amalekites against Israel, nor should we be surprised that the victory was won through prayer. To stand with uplifted arms is still the posture of prayer in many parts of the world, and it was in the ancient world. Thus Moses prayed, and Joshua won the victory over the enemy of God's people. The last two verses of this chapter are not easy to understand. However, the thought is probably that Moses declares that under the Lord's banner victory is assured. The Lord is no less the banner of us as New Testament believers. These chapters are surely intended to teach us that difficulties and trials are to be seen as tests, intended to lead us to daily trust in the Lord, to obedience and to prayer. In this way and this way alone, we can arrive at mature discipleship. We're also shown the mercy of God. Time and again the people failed the test, but the Lord was gracious to them. But we cannot presume upon that mercy. Later, the people will be tested again in almost identical ways. I'm referring to Numbers 20, verse 12, 11, verse 33, and 14, verse 25, if you want to follow up the point I'm making here. However, failure then led to the exclusion of Moses from Canaan, many were slain by a plague from the Lord, and victory was achieved by the same Amalekites. Many failed in this way to enter the promised salvation rest of God in the land, and the warning to us is surely obvious.